All right, in this video we're going to be talking about modules. Modules are simply sets of code already written for you and stored in external Python files that you can use in your own code. Some of them are what are referred to sometimes as core modules. They're modules that are installed when you install Python. But there's bazillions of others that you can download. We're not going to talk about downloading new ones today. Today we're just going to talk about using some of the ones that are built into Python and how we use them. And let me say that probably until we get Python installed on everybody's computer, we're not going to worry too much about some of the external modules that have to be downloaded. We're just going to learn about the built-in ones, because I'm not sure that the online compilers are going to have every single possible one that is available. So first of all, I'm going to show you how you can see what modules are available in the installation of Python you're working on. And if you come to the interactive shell here, you can say help modules, and it will list all of the modules that are built in. And there's a bazillion of them. And actually, some of them you already use, you just don't know it because they're already sort of rolled into Python. You will, if you look through the list, you will see some modules that actually are things that you may have done in Python. I'm not seeing it right off the top of my head, but trust me, it's true. So, and one thing also, just to let you know, that you can do is you can pick one at random, like let's say random, and you can say help random. And it's an interesting thing that idle does. It won't happen probably if you're using the online interpreter, but if you run a command that generates a lot of lines, idle will try to summarize it for you, and it'll say squeeze text, in this case 584 lines. If you double click on it, it'll print it all out, but if you don't want to clutter up your console with it, you can right click on it and hit view, and it will pop up a little inset window that will give you all of the information that was compressed. And you will see that this is a whole lot of information about the random function, or the random module, sorry. More than you probably want, because you probably want to know just what some of the simpler stuff in the random module are. So one thing you can do in that case is there's another command called dir for directory, and if you put the name of a module in, and interestingly enough, you put in the name of the module without quotation marks as a object as opposed to a string. So if I say random here, ooh, interesting. I'm sorry, I know why. First I have to import random so that Python knows I want to work with it. And now if I say dir random, it's going to give me a very brief synopsis of all of the methods that are in random. So you'll see there's a bunch, and you'll also see all these sort of special ones that are in all caps, special ones that have these double underscores in front of and behind them. Mostly you're not going to worry about those. Mostly the methods that you might find useful are going to be the ones that are just single words in quotation marks. These are our methods. So for example, one method of random is randint for random integer. Random just generates a random number. Randrange generates a random number between certain values, and so on. And I'm not going to go through all of what random does, but I just wanted to demonstrate that you can actually get a list of all the methods, which can be helpful if you know kind of what you're looking for, but you don't know the exact name of it, or you've used it before, you just can't remember what they call it, or whatever. So that's great for sort of figuring out what it is you want to find. But now, if we're in a script and we actually want to work with it, This is where we have to start understanding how to import these modules, because if it isn't an external module, you can't just call that method. So for example, randint is a method that generates an integer between two numbers, and so if I want to generate one between 1 and 100, and that may not be right, that may be between 1 and 99. I can't remember exactly the syntax, but in any case, if I try to run this, I'm going to get an error. I will, promise. It says randint is not defined. Now, if I look here, I see what randint definitely is a module. Well, that's because I haven't told my script that I want to use the random module. And there's different ways that there's several different ways that I can do that. And how I do it depends on a couple of factors. So the first thing I could do is I could just say import random. Now, if I do that, every method in random will become available to my program. So, but I have to call it using the random keyword first. To show you what I mean, if I try to run it now, I get randint is not defined. It's because if I import it just using the simple import command, I have to say random.randint. I have to put the name of the library in front of it. And I'm going to do this just to show you what it does. All right, so that generated a random integer between 1 and 100 and gave me 52. Might be 1 and 99. I can't remember if it's inclusive of the last number or not. We'll figure that out later. So that's one way to do it. Now, if I know that I am only going to use the randint function from the random library, I can do this instead. I can say from random import randint. Okay, so now instead of importing all of them for use, it only imports randint. And from a memory point of view, this is preferable. From a memory point of view, we now are only importing one little function. It's almost like we just copied and pasted that little function into our thing instead of copying and pasting the entire random module into our code. And the other advantage is when we do this, we no longer have to preface it with random. If we use the from random import randint or from whatever import whatever, we now can just use the name of the function, because we've told it we're bringing this function in from random. So now when I run it, I get my code and I don't have to type in that extra thing. Now here's something you can do, but you shouldn't do. You can say from random import asterisk, and that means import every function from random. But that's inefficient, and it has another downside which I will explain in a minute. But if you do that, you still do not have to type the name of the module in front of whatever it is you're using. So generated a random integer, didn't have to type in random before randint, whatever. You can import more than one. You could say from random import randint, comma, rand range. Now that would import only these two modules, or only these two functions from the module, which is still more efficient if these are the only two I'm going to use than importing the entire module. Now, one last thing you can do with the imports. If you are importing multiple libraries, multiple modules, especially if there's some that aren't part of the core Python modules, you will sometimes end up with two functions that have the same name from two different libraries. That's going to be a problem for you because they're going to conflict when, if there's, let's say there was another library you imported and it also had a randint. I know that's weird, but then you'd have two randints from two different libraries, and if you try to use randint, wouldn't know which randint you were talking about. If that happens, you can give one of them an alias. Or even if that doesn't happen, you can always give them an alias. So if you say, I'm going to use randint a lot, so I want to give it an alias, I could say from random import randint as RI. Now, watch what happens. Not probably. All right, so now I can use RI. If I try to do that, you will notice that does not work. So anytime you use the from whatever, import whatever, you can't preface it with this, which is why you want to use an alias, because if I had two different ones that had randint, I could not tell the difference between them just by typing this and then the name. It won't work, if that makes sense, hopefully. All right, so this is how we import them. Three different ways. This probably from a efficiency point of view, the most efficient way is to do it like that. The second most efficient way is, and the least efficient is try to avoid doing that. People love to do it because it's simple. They don't have to remember the names. They just boop. And also in some interpreters, and I think idle is one of them, once you've imported it, no, it doesn't. I was going to say I think it does autocomplete, but I guess not. So anyway, that's how we import them. Now there's a handful of modules I want to tell you about that are particularly useful. And rather than importing individual functions here, I'm just going to import the whole, foot itches. I'm going to import the whole module of math, and I'm just going to show you a few of the things that math can do for you. And this is just a few. Math has a bunch. All right, so I just wanted to put a few random numbers there. So first we've got math.pow, and it requires two positional arguments. The first one is the number that you want to raise to some power, and the second is how many times you want to raise it. So that would give me 12 to the third. We have factorial. If you don't remember what factorial is, it multiplies each number by the number below it until you get down to 1. So, for example, 10 factorial would be 10 times 9 times 8 times 7 times 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. We can do math.floor y, and that does rounding, but not true rounding. It rounds down all the time. I'll print these out. The opposite of that is ceiling. It rounds up all the time. Math.hypot gives us the hypotenuse of a right triangle when we give it the two sides that we have. Oops. GCD gives us the greatest common denominator. This is a tricky one, and I don't know if I'll get the syntax right. It is close. So if you have two floating point numbers, you can tell if they are close together, and you give it the two numbers and you give it a tolerance. So if I say abstol 1.0, I believe that's going to return false because these are not within one of each other. Let's see. Oops, I forgot. Oh, forgot my second thing. Okay, right. So that's false. But if I said 1.6, it is true because now the tolerance is 1.6 and they are within 1.6 of each other. So that's kind of useful if you've got a couple numbers and you want to make sure they're within a certain distance of each other. Yeah, you could pretty easily write code to check that, but you can also use the is close, and you can do it in a single thing. Another one that gets used a lot is square root. And that gives you, or SQRT gives you the square root. And there you go. Math also includes a couple of constants. So, oops. So you'll see it prints pi, it prints tau, and it prints e. If you need to use those for anything, they're already built in, so you don't have to type out the numbers. All right, so that is the math library. In the random library, we have a couple of useful functions. So we have random dot rand int, and okay, it's inclusive. So now that I'm importing it, it's showing me the information for it. So it's going to return a random integer inclusive of the two endpoints. So 1 to 100, this is going to return a random integer between 1 and 100. Random dot rand range is going to choose a random item from a range of numbers. Say pick a number between 2 and 300, and if I want, I can say step equals 2, which means that it will only choose between every other number. In other words, it will include 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, so on, but not any, in this case, of the odd numbers. There's one. I'm trying to remember the words. But here, let's go. So this is where dir helps. Whoops. Oh. That's why it didn't work. Okay, so you can see there's a bunch of different ones. Uniform, square root, choices, choices. Okay, so now I can't remember which one it was I wanted to show you, but let's choose a random element from a non-empty sequence. Okay, so in this case you would give it a list or a tuple, like this would choose one of those numbers, or don't know what that does. Okay, I'm not going to show you. We'll just go with these. These are three of the ones you use the most. Whoops. Where did I miss something? Oh, I had an extra. Oh, I didn't have an extra. That was a tuple. And so you'll see here, 45 was a random between 1 and 100. 36, it was random between 2 and 300 in steps of 2. Random choice, it chose from this list, and it chose, in this case, the very first item from the list. So that is random. Another useful one, which I'm not going to talk about much today, because it's probably not available in the online compilers, or at least not all of them, is import OS. And import OS actually lets you import some functions that work directly with your operating system. And we're going to use import OS soon. Once we get Python installed on everybody's computers, we're going to use OS to actually read files from the hard drive, so to actually work with text files. Import sys. Sys is the system file. It tells us about our Python installation. So, for example, print sys.executable. You'll notice it's not a function, it's actually a constant. And this shows me where on my computer the executable Python file is located. Gives me the entire file path to it. There's other stuff that sys does. Most often we use it. We don't often use sys in a program. Often we use it when we're trying to get Python configured for something maybe unusual, or trying to find out specific version information. I think version might be a might be a command. I can't remember for sure. Yeah, that gives us the exact version of Python that I'm running, 3.7.1. And so on. Let's see, what else? Two more I'm going to show you. Statistics. And we could have, yeah, that's one. So remember when I made you do that list where you had to do mean, median, and mode? Well, we could have just used this function and saved us a lot of time. the mode is 4. So I could get standard deviation is 1 point, and I could get the variance. If you're into stats, those are some of the main ones that you get a lot. Those are like the very most basic ones. All right, so that's the statistics module. Some of them are very specialized. You won't use them ever. Some are really common, like math, OS, that you will use quite a bit. But the important thing right now is to know that they exist and know how to use them. All right, that's it for now. Until next time.